Hey guys, welcome to an early edition of the Finn's Faithful podcast here. Thanks for joining us early afternoon, maybe on your lunch break, checking us out. As always, we're live on YouTube and on X, and it's Senior Bowl week. Starts, I believe, today. The players got their measurements, height, weight, arm length. While it might not sound much to some, it's actually very important for some of these guys how long their arms are. Arm length has never been so important. To help me break down these prospects and all these guys plus more, I'm joined by a friend of the program, Ryan Roberts, draft analyst and college football analyst from A to Z Sports. Ryan, thanks for joining me this early afternoon. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. Like you said, we got Senior Bowl week. East West has been going on for the next couple of days. I'll be at the combine next month as well. So it's gonna be a busy couple months heading up to April, man, for sure. And I appreciate you for having me on as always.
Yeah. It's fun times for the draft season. It's hot and heavy already. And I always say, look, a couple of these guys watching this game, take a look at the practice because more than likely a couple of these guys will be Miami Dolphins.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into the prospects, Ryan, we talked in early October. I had you on the show. Lots happened. I think when we talked, it was the two was coming back from injury or was injured. I don't remember. A lot's happened. They made it a kind of a nice little late season run. Ended up only winning 8 games, missing the playoffs. Disappointing season. Tua was hurt again at the end of the season. Then they decided to bring Grier, and to a lesser extent, McDaniels back. Ryan, kind of your perspective since the last time we talked with the Dolphins. Has anything changed with their trajectory, in your opinion?
Not a ton, really. I mean, because I remember the last time we did talk, Tua. I don't think Tua had a clear timeline of return,
Yeah,
so he was just
right.
out. And we had discussed at that point, contingency plans for the future at quarterback position, right? And I think my perspective hasn't changed at all on that. Like, you need to start preparing for the worst. I mean, it's not like me saying Tua is going to have a career-ending injury next year, but like if I'm the Miami Dolphins with how bad the backup quarterback situation was this year, like you need to be able to start preparing. So maybe that's a second or third round quarterback take this year, right? A guy that can hopefully learn, or maybe like a high upside kid that you can be patient with a little bit. I think quarterback is a main conversation that needs to happen. My feelings on Chris Grier. Like I don't think that. I just don't think he's the guy, but he's going to be the guy for another year, it seems, at least. So I have questions on the long-term future of the Miami Dolphins. I'm hoping for the absolute best for them because my dad is a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan. So I hope that they are able to turn around and figure it out. But because the worst part is that I think at least I think Mike McDaniel is at least a really good offensive mind, right? Is he a great head coach? I'm not really sure. But I also don't think that he's been given the tools necessary all the time to prove that he's a great head coach. Like, I just look at the roster and I think there's some obvious weak points. There's obviously some spots that need to get upgraded. And when you come back to it at the end of the day, if it's an absence of talent, it's a GM issue, right? Like, why is the offensive line still a mess? Why is interior defensive line still a position that needs to be upgraded? Why do you not have a backup quarterback that is more adept to be able to come in and at least give you something, right? So I think the general manager, until there's a proven commodity in there and not Chris Grier, I don't feel great about the trajectory, but I think quarterback is a spot that you need to look at. And you need to try to figure out some you need to retool this roster very quickly, because obviously with the Tyreek Hill saga now happening, like there's a lot in Miami Dolphins land to figure out, and it's going to be a volatile offseason, it seems like, even though it hasn't really been from a change perspective with Miami so far.
Yeah, because they're kind of stuck, right? I mean, I don't know how much they really can do. What are your thoughts on the whole Tyreek situation? I mean, would you move on, or would you do whatever? Because to me, this situation is kind of like the Jimmy Butler situation. This stuff never gets better, right?
Yeah.
It never gets better. He's kind of backtracked, but as soon as he has 2 catches for 37 yards and the team's 1-3, you'll see this pop up. It doesn't change, right?
Yeah. I don't think it does. No, here's the problem with it, though, is that if you move off of Tyreek Hill, I almost think that you need to do like a full-scale rebuild at that point, because he's a wide receiver, right? And wide receivers are replaceable in theory. Like there's a lot of really good receivers in the NFL right now, but he's so important to the offense. I mean, you basically have built your offense around him, and the fact that he was banged up and inefficient, throughout a large portion of the season, I think that obviously really hurt the offense. And if you move off of Tyreek, I think that you almost need to kind of take a step back and be like, hey, the long term, we need to figure this out. Like, this isn't a short term thing. Like, I think that he is so important to the offense that completely readjusting how you do things offensively is a tall order in one offseason, especially with a coach that might be on a hot seat, especially with a quarterback whose long-term future is in question. Like, it's a really tough situation to be in. I personally would try to trade if there's anything of value out there, because I don't think that this is going to get a lot better. The problem is that if you do make that move, you need to start kind of figuring out other parts of the roster that might be assets that you can create more assets for the lack of a better terminology. So I think it's a tough spot to be in. He was obviously he's obviously a great player when he's locked in and he's ready to go. And he's had a couple great seasons for Miami, but I do think that this is trending in a very bad direction. I don't think it's feasible.
Yeah, either do I. And I think you make a great point. I agree with you. People don't realize, even though the offense is taking a step back, this offense is built on the gravity that Tyreek Hill creates. You almost need to reinvent the whole offense. All right, shout out to the Dive Bar Podcast. Hey, guys, please, tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, they are live. They have a great content. Obviously, they had it. Speaking of Tyreek Hill, these guys have had Tyreek Hill on. They had Jeff Darlington on a few weeks ago. Tonight, Bills Mafia introduced their podcast, so check them out. The Dive Bar Podcast at 8 p.m. Fellas, we love the stuff you do over there. All right, you talked about quarterback. Let's start there with the Senior Bowl. Interesting group, right? There's always a quarterback that makes that jump in this group. You talk about developmental guys, all right? I think we spoke about Milroy last time you were on. To me, he's a guy, I don't know. I don't think he makes it to 48 because no matter what anybody says, guys with those attributes don't usually fall like that, right? Somebody's going to fall in love with the guy when he's in shirts and shorts. He's a tantalizing prospect. But he's a guy I would like to take a swing on because I think they got to take swings. Not like, even though as much as I like Kyle McCord or these other quarterbacks who might fit the system better, they need to take a high upside swing at this position because I don't think the guy's playing regardless next year. What are your thoughts on we'll start with Milroy. What does he got to do here? How high do you ultimately think Milroy will go? Ryan, do you think he's a first rounder?
I think he could be in the right situation. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the kid that someone trades back into the late first round to take. There's some people that still think that he could be a top 10 pick. I don't at this juncture. Like, I really don't. I think this is more of a late first round swing, trade up conversation, or he's going to be an early second rounder. Like, the one team that I keep kind of circling is I believe the Cleveland Browns has the number 33rd overall pick. I'm kind of convinced that Cleveland. Yeah. And I think that they're a team that is maybe best afforded to, even though they have a big quarterback gap right now with the Deshaun Watson situation. I think they might be a team that best player available at number 2, whoever they deem that to be, whether that's Abdul Carter, whether that's Travis Hunter, if the Titans go quarterback, like whoever that is, best player available. And then you take Milroy at 33, because at the end of the day, if a second round quarterback doesn't work out, like, nobody's going to bat an eye. Like, it is a low term investment for a high important position at the end of the day. So I think he's a late first rounder or early second rounder, because we talk about this class. This is a 2 quarterback class at the top, as far as 2 guys I think are going to go in the top 10 in Cameron Ward and Shedeur Sanders. But then after that, Milroy's the quarterback 3 by default at this point. I mean, does a Jackson Darts have enough ammo to be able to work himself up into that conversation? Does the team try to talk themselves into like a Will Howard from Ohio State? Like, I still have my reservations. I think at the end of the day, some team is going to look at Jalen Milroy, and this is a right or wrong thing. Like, sometimes this works great. Sometimes this works horribly. A coach is going to look at Jalen Milroy, who has great character reports, and everybody loves him around that building, and he's supposed to be a really smart young man. Great. They're going to look at him and say, those shortcomings in the second half of the year, I can fix that. But I can't teach a kid being physically as put together as he is, run a 4.3 something in the 40 more than likely, have a strong arm. Like, I can teach that kid how to play quarterback, and it's either going to get a team very happy for a long term, or it's going to get a team fired potentially, right? Which is why I don't think that he goes top 10. I think he's more in the late first, early second round bucket, but I think that he has the opportunity in Mobile to solidify himself as a definite first rounder. I think right now he's probably more in that early second bucket as far as where teams are happy, but the more that they gravitate towards him, the more they learn about him, as long as he checks out from a mental perspective, from a character perspective, and they see him, wow a couple times with his arm strength and all that type of stuff, I think he has a chance to rise and solidify himself as a first rounder. But I think he's right on that line right now as far as being a late first, early second round guy today.
I think if he does make the jump, it's, let's say, somewhere in the top 20 or 15, this is the week he'll do it, right? Because he's going to test well.
Where it starts.
He's I can remember Phillip Rivers. You remember going back? I remember what he did in the Senior Bowl. Herbert, all these guys. There's always a guy who comes in and kind of, we had this opinion of him, and then he kind of puts a stamp of approval. And he's a lobby room guy. You're going to shake his hand. You're going to look at him. You're going to say, I want to marry this guy, right? Like, this is the kind of guy I want coming off the bus at that position. And I say he's a high upside swing. So the Dolphins probably would have to move up in the second round. But if they're going to take a shot, I just want it. You know what I mean? I don't want this other, kind of fit the system, a Kyle McCord, like I mentioned earlier, or whoever, even a Jackson Dart. I want somebody who's got some potential. I mean, you look at what it takes in the playoffs, right? We just saw yesterday. Yeah. The physicality of these guys, the athleticism at that position, it takes a different breed. And I know he's got problem. Look, he's not gonna help you till 2 or 3 years down the road, probably. But I just think he's a guy. Yeah.
If the Dolphins are able to go get a guy like a Milroe too, I think he's the perfect for the situation, because you do have Tua still there, right? Like, this isn't a situation where like
Alex
you need,
Smith,
you treat like the Alex Smith. Exactly. I mean, you don't need him to come in first game in the 2025 season and be the savior. Like, you can be, you can be patient with him, with a guy like a Milroe. And the problem is, George, is that I think that there's not really anybody like, well, obviously there's no quarterback in this class that's going to run 4.3 something if he chooses to run. And yes, he's very talented. Obviously, some of the probably the best raw gifts of anybody in this class. But what my point is that if we're talking about a second round swing of a quarterback, there's no ceiling in this class other than Milroe that might potentially be there. Because then we're talking about the high floor guys, right? Like, Jackson Dart has some talents. Like, he's a good athlete and all that type of stuff. Yeah. But he's maybe a top 100 pick because he brings a higher floor to the table. Will Howard, if he goes in the top 100 for whatever reason, is that kid's played a ton of football. He's got a big frame. He won a championship. Like, he's a floor kid. He's not a ceiling kid. So if you're looking for a ceiling player, Milroe's probably the only one that's going to be available in that type of range.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think you said it. I couldn't have said it any better. I think because I'm looking more of the ceiling than the floor. Because the Dolphins usually take guys with the floor at that position. So, all right.
I think the only way that, just to finish the conversation is
go ahead.
The only other vantage point I could see or perspective on this conversation is if Miami is certain that Tua is going to be good for the next 4 years or whatever it is, like a decent timeline, then maybe you mortgage for the floor a little bit, right? Because he still does have an injury history. Yeah. Maybe at that point, then you're like, third round, I'll take a Jackson Dart, I'll take a Will Howard to at least be a very good backup quarterback potentially, but maybe he's never going to be a starter, but I feel good about Tua. It really depends on, and I don't have the answers to this. This is just speculation as far as him constantly getting injured and the repeated head trauma and all that type of stuff. But if Miami feels that they're comfortable with where Tua is and they like him for the long term and they're not worried about the medical stuff as much as maybe the media is, then that might change your perspective. But if we're talking about a player to come in to develop and to potentially maybe be the starter down the line if Tua does falter at some point, then that's where the ceiling conversation obviously happens.
Because I don't want to take one high regardless, unless a Cam Ward fell or something like that. Because let's see how this season plays out. Let's see who's picking for the Miami Dolphins next year in a better quarterback class. So I think they need to take a shot at one somewhere in the middle rounds here, because they don't have the luxury of sitting back and just saying we'll wait for next year, especially this regime. All right. Are there any other guys you like? You mentioned some of them. Will Howard will be there. Jackson Dart, Dylan Gabriel. My guy, Riley Leonard. I've always had this thing for Riley Leonard. I know, look, he's a one-read quarterback right now. I see, I know Dolphin fans are going to hate me. I think his ceiling is Ryan Tannehill. Is that,
body
does that make,
I know, I was going to say his body type is very similar, and obviously he's a great athlete. I mean, because people forget, Ryan Tannehill early in his Texas A&M career was a wide receiver before he moved to quarterback, right, full time again. So I've covered Riley Leonard a lot with my Notre Dame fandom and stuff. Riley's a great athlete, man. Like a tremendous athlete. If he tests, he's going to run in the 4.5s at right around almost 6'4" and 221 pounds. Like he's going to run 4.5 something. He's a great athlete. The problem is that like he's just such a work in progress as a passer. He's got some natural skills there as far as like quick release and throwing from multiple platforms and like that type of stuff. But he's he's a developmental kid though, right? I think I put him in a mock draft in like the 4th, 5th, or 6th. I think it was the 5th round. I put him to back up Lamar in Baltimore, right? As far as like, because I think his style is kind of similar as far as like QB read stuff, quarterback power, just quarterback run game in general, and you hopefully develop him behind someone like Lamar, or maybe you stash and trade at some point down the line. Like I don't know, right? But
yeah,
I think that he's a very talented athlete. I'm interested to see him in this setting where, I mean, it took him a while at Notre Dame this year to get the timing down with some guys. So I'm interested to see how that timing improves in like just a couple days of practice. Like that's going to be interesting. But overall, it's a really underwhelming quarterback group down in Mobile, to be honest. And it's not their fault, right? One, Shedeur Sanders went to East West Shrine Bowl, because of their long-standing relationship there. So he went to East West. Cam Ward at least was thinking about the Senior Bowl, but he ends up not playing in the game because why would he, right, at this point? Like, it doesn't matter for him. The only thing that matters for Cam Ward the rest of this process is those conversations with teams, right? Those interviews. Like, that's the only thing that matters for Cameron Ward at this point. So I definitely, it's fine him not being there. Jackson Dart's on the roster, but I'm interested to see if he does anything there. The only other guy that here's a weird one, and some people are going to be like, oh my God, that guy's still in college.
Kid?
Yeah, Tyler Shuck, man. Like I studied him a lot because Notre Dame played him this year, but like he had a really good year for Louisville. So he was Oregon, Texas Tech, and then ended at Louisville. And
he was a top prospect too coming out, wasn't he? He was a highly recruited guy.
And he was really productive throughout his career. The problem was he was always hurt. Like he was just never healthy. Like he would only play like 5-6 games a year typically. Like he was just always banged up. And he was an older prospect, obviously, but he put up a fully healthy season at Louisville this year. And the kid's going to measure in over 6'4". He's going to be over 230 pounds. He's probably going to run like 4.7 flat in the 40. He can move pretty well. He's got a pretty strong arm as well. I think he's a little bit mechanical as a passer, but like 5th, 6th rounds, backup quarterback with some upside. Yeah. Like that's a guy that I'm interested to see because I think that he is another player that just from a body type, arm strength perspective, he can show out in this type of event. Like he's going to look good throwing the football in air and teams are going to get excited about him. And I've only heard good things about his character as well. So there's one guy that like I would say I'm excited for. It would be Tyler Shuck. But again, not Tyler Shuck, the top hunter pick Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck, the middle of day 3 potential backup quarterback Tyler Shuck. But there's nothing wrong with that.
Not the first round Brandon Whedon kind of. Yeah.
There's he's probably more physically talented than Brandon Whedon, which is pretty hilarious. But,
all right, guys, we have about over 140 of you guys watching on X. Come on over to YouTube, guys. Please hit that like, subscribe, help support the channel. We really appreciate it. Again, we're joined by Ryan Roberts from A to Z Sports, breaking down the Senior Bowl and the prospects and some of the guys the Dolphins should be looking at. All right, so the quarterbacks, I think those are kind of the guys. I think we kind of covered the quarterback position. Anything else to add on the quarterbacks or?
Quick shout out. So Taylor Elgersma, who is a Canadian quarterback, played his college in Canada. So for people that don't know, I actually scout for the College Gridiron Showcase, which is one of the lower end all-star events that happens down in the state in Texas. We're in Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he was actually our first ever College Gridiron Showcase participant to get called up to the Senior Bowl. So he measured 6'4", 5/8", 213 pounds at over 9-inch hands. Like, just interesting to watch. First Canadian college kid to ever get invited to the Senior Bowl as well. So, like, I'm just excited to see him down there. I don't know how well he's going to perform, but, like, it's just really cool to have our first CGS guy down at Mobile.
Yeah. Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, I'm excited about this year's Senior Bowl, actually. There's some prospects as we get down this list. All right, quickly on the running backs, great class overall. We talked about a little bit of this backstage, but as far as this game, I guess Scadabo's the guy who everybody's attention will be on. What are your thoughts kind of on him? I know the speed's going to be an issue, right? But he's a physical playmaker. There's a lot of hype around him. I just don't know when the smoke clears how good of a really true – we're looking at a Peyton Hillis here. I mean, what are we looking at with Scadabo?
I think he reminds me a lot of Cody Schrader that came out of Missouri last year, which I mean, Cody Schrader was just on the Rams roster that went to the playoffs, right? So like, obviously he's a special teamer for the Rams. So but it's not a shot at him at all. I think that he is a really physical kid. I think he'll block, he'll catch, and his feet are actually pretty underrated for his size. Like he's not just like a pure plotter, but I just think he really lacks explosiveness, man. Like you could sell me on him being a rotational player in the backfield that's going to play special teams as far as kick coverage units, and he's going to do all that type of stuff. I think he's got a good floor there. I just really struggle with the overall explosiveness and athleticism. I think that he's going to be a pretty poor tester. I don't expect great explosiveness. I don't expect great speed, but I think he can be a solid member of a room. I just don't necessarily see, like some people are going to talk about him top 100. I don't see that at all. I don't see him as a number one back, even in an overall system. Like I don't see a perennial 1,000-yard back. Like I don't see that. I see a guy that could be a depth piece in a room and could play special teams. That's what I see with a guy like Cameron Scadaboo, who's got a great story. I mean, former Sac State kid, was not recruited at all, was a 0-star recruit, went to Sac State. Now he's one of the better running backs in college football. Nothing wrong with that story at all. It's just, I just think that the overall lack of athleticism and just pure explosiveness, I think is a little bit debilitating is not the right word, but I think it's a little limiting to his upside.
Yeah. He's got a ceiling.
Yes.
Now, again, a Dolphins team that needs short yardage guys for short yardage, I could see him fitting in this room 4th, 5th round. I wouldn't hate it, but there's so many good guys in this class, though. We're just talking strictly Senior Bowl. He's probably the top guy there. I mean, any other guys you like? I know who else is at the Senior Bowl? The kid from
there's a couple. There's a couple I like.
Yeah, Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon is there. Devin Neal.
Yeah.
I like Marks at USC. What are your any guys you like? Any sleepers there?
I love Woody Marks. Woody Marks was a former Mississippi State runner that obviously ended with USC. I thought his tape this year was really good. Now, he's not going to be the biggest back of all time. He's just going to be a hair over 200 pounds, but I think it was like 204, I think, before the season. So maybe he comes in at like 205, 207, like somewhere in that ballpark. But that kid's really creative. He's great in space, good first to second level vision, and he catches the football really, really well. I think he has the all-time FBS record for receptions by a running back in his career. So he's caught a ton of passes in his career, both at Mississippi State and USC. So I like him a lot. You mentioned Devin Neal, another kid who's just great with first and second level vision. Not explosive, but smooth as heck. Makes guys miss in tight quarters. I really like Devin Neal a lot. Damian Martinez for Miami, I think, is an interesting guy. He came in for scouts before the year, weighed in at 241 pounds. I don't have the measurement on him as far as how much he weighs. I hope that he cuts down a little bit, because there were some moments in Miami this year, who obviously was a big passing offense with Cameron Ward, but there were some moments where there were games where you're like, okay, that's Damian Martinez that I saw at Oregon State. It was just very inconsistent this year for X, Y, and Z reasons. So I think he's incredibly creative for a bigger back. I think he's got good feet. I'm excited to see him down in Mobile to see just how he kind of implements himself against some really talented defenders down there. And then Ollie Gordon is like he is the most biggest enigma at running back in this class, probably. He weighed in at over 6'1", 200, and I think he was 233 pounds. So he's a huge back, man. 2023 season, he looked like he was going to be a top 5 running back in this class. Like he looked like that because he ran for like over 1,600 yards, over 1,700 yards, was dynamic. This year was banged up a little bit. Also was a part of a really bad Oklahoma State team, which didn't help him at all. The offensive line wasn't very good. The passing game was not good. It was just, everybody knew that Zero was going to get the football. Now, I thought his tape was poor this year. Like, I just was not a big fan of it. I thought he just looked a step slower, maybe add a little bit too much weight, put some body armor on. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm interested to see, 1, does he look healthy? 2, what does the body look like with 233 pounds on his frame? And then 3, can he start to get some of that fanfare back as far as from the NFL side of things? Because he was a kid that was viewed as a potential top 100 player for sure before the season, who I think is kind of clawing to get drafted right now, man. Like, it's not a foregone conclusion that Ollie Gordon gets drafted. I think if he has a big Senior Bowl week and he tests better than maybe some people expect, that he could start to move up boards a little bit, but this week is going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think, too, good news for the Dolphins, they can get a big back, because they need a big back. They got A-Chain and Jalen Wright basically coming back next year. There's going to be some good late round options, bigger backs fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round, and Ollie Gordon could be one of them. All right, let's move. Let's go to the receivers. Interesting group. Obviously, the kid local here, Restrepo from UM. I'm gonna butcher his name. I'm Aminar, and a guy I really like is Savon Williams. His size, athleticism, the guy's a freak at the position. And I'll tell you, I like Jalen Royals a lot out of Utah State. How do you feel about this group?
So overall, I think the wide receiver class in 2025, not counting just Senior Bowl players, but just overall, is a little bit below average to what we've seen the last few years. But again, we've had like 4 of the last 5 years kind of historical wide receiver classes. So like, it's not a shot at the class necessarily. It's just not quite, a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase class, right? Like it just isn't that type of group. But I do think there's value, especially in like the mid rounds. And I think Jalen Royals is one that I think could go top 100 out of Utah State. He's not a burner. He's not the most dynamic athlete in the class, but he just understands how to play wide receiver. Like he's really good tracking the football. He runs good routes. He's good after the catch. I'm a big fan of Jalen Royals. One guy that you just mentioned, Alec Ayomanor, Ayomanor is actually how you pronounce it.
By the way, there's so many guys that are hard to pronounce, especially the offensive line group. It's Bao, Bo, Embo. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's bad too, man, because like I feel like there's a lot of names this year that I'm just like, that's not how that's spelled, like phonetically. Like that is not how that is spelled at all. But sure, we'll go with that. But Alec Ayomanor, I'm gonna get it at some point here.
Yeah,
big bodied kid, 6'2", 211 pounds. He is so odd though, because you think 6'2", 210 plus pounds, boundary receiver. There's a stigma that you get in your mind. He's gonna be good in the air. He's gonna be physical. He's got some physicality to him, but like he's not consistently physical. What he wins on is he's a really good route runner, man. Really good route runner, really good body control. I'm interested to see because there's going to be some press man corners in this class down in Mobile that are going to challenge a kid like that, who I'm interested to see just one, how he handles press, how he handles contact down the field, because he's a kid that could rise 100% in this class. A really interesting player. I feel like Xavier Restrepo is just going to be a good slot receiver in the NFL no matter where he lands. Like you're just going to be like, yep, he's going to catch 60 plus balls and he's going to be a starting slot. Like it's just what he's going to be,
On Restrepo, before you could just to cut you off for a second. I don't think he's going to go as high as people are putting him. Do you see that? I've seen him late first round.
No.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I think he could go top 75. I think he could sneak into the second rounds. I think he might be a third rounder because he's going to test and it's just going to be like,
4.51.
4.5. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, he might be like a 4.55, 4.56 guy, but like he just wins. I mean, like he just wins reps and he catches everything that gets into his frame. You know what I mean? So like he's just gonna play in the NFL for a long time. I could see him being like one of those Danny Amendola clones where he just makes plays.
Great
like, all he does, So he'll play in the NFL. The 2 wide receivers that I'm most interested in for completely different reasons are the Iowa State kids that are going to be there. We got Jaden Higgins. Who's the tree? He's like almost 6'4", verified, big body. He was actually an Eastern Kentucky kid before he transferred to Iowa State. So he's an SCS kid going up to the FBS. I question as far as like his ability to separate, and I don't think he has dominant deep speed, but like he has got great hands and really good body control. So can he make some more separation in Mobile than maybe I give him credit for? I'm interested to see that. Jalen Noel is like one of my guys in the class, the slot receiver there. He's a hair under 5'10". He's 195, 196 pounds, but that kid knows how to play wide receiver. He gets open. Like he just gets open consistently. What I just said about Restrepo, I feel the same about Jalen Noel. There's not going to be nothing dynamic about him, even though I think Noel's a little better after the catch than what Restrepo is, but he's just going to make plays, man. He's going to catch a ton of passes. Like I would be surprised if a guy like a Jalen Noel wasn't a solid starter in the NFL as a slot receiver. Like I'd be very surprised if he wasn't at least that. Savon Williams, I'm glad you mentioned him, and I'll end with this one. No, it's a good thing. I swear it's a good thing. He is the most interesting player maybe in this class of wide receivers. He is almost 6'4". He's over 220 pounds. He has played wide receiver almost exclusively at TCU, but this year they started running Wildcat with him. They started running him out of the backfield in general. I know a team in the NFL right now, a scouting department, that has a top 100 grade on him as a running back in the NFL.
Wow.
Not as a receiver. So
like Brandon Jacobs mode?
He's viewed very differently by a lot of different teams because I think in the preseason, again, he was right around 6'4". I think he was like 6'3" and 6'8", something like that. But he was 228 pounds. So like he's a big bodied receiver. He's huge. But there's some teams I think view him as a running back. There's some that view him a wide receiver. There's some that view him as a gadget hybrid type of dude that can do a lot of different things, end arounds, jet sweeps, like that type of stuff. So I'm interested to see because I would not be shocked if this week, outside of him running routes, if he's in some running back drills, see if he can pass block at all, see if he runs some routes against linebackers, like that type of thing. I'm very interested to see Savon Williams because I don't think he's going to run incredibly fast, but I think he's going to jump really well. Like he's going to have a crazy vertical. He's going to have a really good broad jump. He's explosive. He's very explosive in tight quarters, and he runs incredibly hard. Like he doesn't run like a wide receiver. He runs like a running back, which is why I think some teams have the interest in him. And if he can run with better pad level and consistently, I could see him being a running back in the NFL, despite him being a little bit taller. So he is like your ultimate, what do you do with him? He's a top 100 athlete though in this class. The question is running back, wide receiver, a little bit of both. I'm interested to see how he's used in the Senior Bowl.
So you see him more of a third round, or somebody falls in love with him, gets in the late second?
I think he's going to go top 100 for sure. I could see him going top 64 if he has a great process and he tests well and he checks everything out. But I'm more, George, just fascinated again by wherever he ends up going. Is he drafted as a running back? Is he drafted as a receiver? Is he drafted as a gadget? Like there's some teams that are just going to see him very different positionally. Everyone likes the athlete, I think, for the most part of people that I've talked to. It's just a question of, is that a starting wide receiver or is that a committee running back that can do things in the passing game that could be potentially special? So maybe think Cordarrelle Patterson to a degree, like that might be the comp, but he's got a lot of intriguing upside from a just usage perspective.
Yeah, he's even bigger than Cordell. I think, what is Cordell, about 6'2"? I think. And yeah, the Dolphins are going to look, if they're going to make an improvement in the wide receiver room, it'll be with some size. I can imagine what Mike McDaniel might think of this guy, what he can do with the jet sweeps and all that stuff. A little Debo-ish role, maybe.
I'm dreaming of him with Miami, San Francisco, or LA, the Rams. Like I want to see him in one of those McVay, Shanahan-esque systems. I want to see that because him running outside zone, him running stuff out of the backfield, him doing jet stuff at times. Like there's a lot you could do with a guy like a Savon Williams.
Yeah. And just to wrap up the receiver, Higgins, the kid out of Utah State, he just, to me, screams like a Green Bay Packer, man. Like I could see him such on Green Bay.
Royals comp for me was Jaden Reed, who literally plays for Green Bay. Like that was my comp for him. Like I could see him 100% there.
Yeah.
It was my comp for him. Name just escaped me. Higgins out of Iowa State. I agree with you on him too for Green Bay because it's going to be the easiest comp of all time because they're both Iowa State kids, but like it's hard not to see some Allen Lazard there, right? Like it's impossible not to see a little bit of Allen Lazard, who obviously
I didn't think of that
too, but yeah, I could see both those guys fitting into that type of room because they're very good complementary skill sets. I don't think necessarily they're like number one receivers, but like as a second to third wide receiver in a room, I could see that type of upside for both guys for different reasons.
Yeah. All right. So let's quickly move on to the tight end group. Group I really like. Fannin Jr. is going to be there. Again, we mentioned a lot of these guys. Some of these guys won't end up working out or doing anything, but these are the guys who are on the roster. Gunnar Helm, obviously Jason Taylor's son, the great Miami Dolphin, Mason Taylor, and then we got the kid locally here from Miami, Elijah Arroyo. How do you like this group?
It's a great group overall. I mean, obviously, just kind of working past just the Senior Bowl guys for a second. Tight end group is one of the best classes that we have this year. There's a couple first round talents, but then there's really good mid round type of players as well. I mean, you can find a different body type and style for every team as well, which is very unique. I mean, you mentioned like Elijah Arroyo, who is, even though he weighed in at 251 pounds, he's kind of still your movement-based tight end, right? Like you're going to use him in the slot at times. You're going to motion him. You're going to utilize him as kind of an H type of thing as far as like creating mismatches with linebackers and some safeties at times. So Elijah Arroyo is super interesting, but he also is he's a bigger body, but obviously then we're going to talk about a smaller body and like a Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, who is listed, I think, generously at 6'4", 240. Like I'd be surprised if he's 6'4". I don't know if he'll be 6'3", to be honest. Like
Did
he's
he
a little
measure?
bit of a smaller guy.
Did they measure him? I don't know.
I don't know if they have the official measure. I know that they're supposed to be measuring, but I haven't checked recently as far as like what the officials are on him yet.
I'll check. Go ahead. I'll check. You go.
Yeah.
Go,
But
you
he's a
can
guy
finish your
that
point.
some people have estimated between being like 6'2.5", 6'3.5", somewhere in that ballpark, 235 pounds, maybe 240 on a good day. Like we'll see. But he's a pure H, big slots, move all over the place, kind of a mismatch weapon who's going to be interesting to see how much separation he creates. But then you got some of the bigger guys, obviously, too. Like you mentioned Mason Taylor, who played at LSU, Jason Taylor's son, who didn't really like him early in his career. I thought he was a little bit clunky and stuff, but then I think he got tons smoother this year running routes. I think he plays in line more than just about anybody that's going to be in Mobile this week as well. And then Gunnar Helm's like one of the big breakouts in the tight end class. I mean, there's kind of a difference of opinion as far as like who tight end 3 in this class is, even though some people won't want to talk about it, because there's pretty much right now, I would say that the 2 tight ends that are going to get drafted first is going to be Tyler Warren, and then it's going to be Colston Loveland out of Michigan right now. Like those are the 2 guys that I'm pretty confident in. Both well, I think Warren's definitely going in the first round. I think Loveland could go in the first round as well. But after that, there's going to be some people that love Fannin as tight end 3. There's going to be some people that like even a Mason Taylor at tight end 3. There's going to be some that love a Gunnar Helm at tight end 3 out of Texas. It's going to depend on what flavor you're looking for, but Gunnar Helm is going to be over 6'5" hair. He's going to be 250 plus pounds. He's going to play a lot more in line than some of these guys. So kind of that all around skill set, I think, is going to be really attractive to some teams.
Yeah, I couldn't find his measurement from today, but Arroyo came in at 6'4" and 251 with 33.1 inch arm. So yeah, I don't see the Fannin Jr., but yeah, Arroyo got good size there. All right, so anything else in the tight ends?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. Like I said, Helm. I'm interested to see Arroyo as far as just working in space. Mason Taylor. One guy that I do like that I didn't think had a great year, but I liked him before the season was Jake Brenningstool from Clemson. He's a little bit of a taller, high cut kid who needs to add weight. He was only about 236 pounds before the season, so I'm hoping that he's more in the 245-pound range. But he's a really gifted athlete. Kind of struggled with drops a little bit more at Clemson this year than in years past. But I think Brenningstool, as a 6'5" plus, hopefully 240 plus pound kid, I think he has a lot of receiving upside to be excited about.
A late round, maybe even possibly undrafted guy, Fedoni out of Nebraska.
Yeah, he just has so many injuries, man.
Yeah,
like he's missed the season. He's been banged up. Yeah,
priority free agent. A priority free agent for me. He's interesting. All right,
he's interesting.
Let's get like shout out to 1896 Vice, friend of the program, Magic City Don. Everybody, we have almost 200 viewers on X. Come on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button and like and support the channel and share it. Again, we're joined by Ryan Roberts, draft and college football analyst for A to Z Sports. Actually, and also a scout for College Gridiron. I should have mentioned that. All right. Like my man Kenny from 1896 Vice, give me the big dogs in the trenches. Let's go on the offensive line here. Good group. First of all, who do you think the best offensive lineman here is in this group? Because there's mixed opinions.
Man,
on
that's
these
a great
guys.
Question.
Yeah,
that's a great question. My top guy is Jonas Savon out of Arizona. That's in. That's
love it.
There. I routinely give him the Miami and mock drafts, which is pretty hilarious.
At 13 or 48?
13 I've done a couple times. Man, I'm obsessed with this kid. I really am. He's probably more of a late first round, early second round guy that's potentially going to go there. But like, I just think he's going to be a starter and a plus upside kid at multiple spots. He measured in today at nearly 6'4", 339 pounds, but he has 34.5-inch arms, right? So like he's long as heck. He's played offensive tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played left tackle, and he's played guard at Arizona. I think he's a pro bowler at guard, but I think there's a chance that a team drafts him to play tackle. Like I think that they could, just based upon the length and the athleticism. So I'm very interested to see just how much his reps are split this week is between tackle and guard, which is what the Senior Bowl is designed for. But I think that kid's a pro bowler inside, if nothing else.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm right there with you. If they took him at 13, because what this team needs, specifically the Dolphins, is physicality up front, not just an offensive lineman. The guy has movement skills for his size. He's just a nasty guy. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you told me they took him at 13 and they put him at guard, I agree with you. I think this guy in a year or two is a Pro Bowl guard, and I got no problem with that pick.
Love it.
None.
Love it. See, some people find that a little too hot for some people. So I'm glad that we're on the same page on that one.
No, is it a little rich? No, but like, who else am I taking there? You know, am I going tight end? Am I going Malachi Starks? Am I going one of the defensive tackles? You know, or another lineman? You know, because to me, this guy also brings some versatility. If you need him at right tackle in a pinch, I think he gives it to you.
Yeah. I think there's going to be some teams I think that do just view him as a tackle based upon the length. Like I really do think that because, again, I mean, 34.5-inch arms, that's not like a barely hitting the threshold. That is you surpass the threshold. Like if you're over 34, you are good to go on any football team as an offensive tackle. So I would not be shocked if a team just views him as a right tackle on the NFL level, but I would not be shocked at all if a team views him as a little bit of both. And he reminds me a little bit of a different body type, but Jenkins that plays for the Green Bay, who's been a Pro Bowl guard. What's his first name? It starts with an E.
Elijah or no?
It's a little bit of a unique name, but he's been a Pro Bowler as a guard, but he's also played tackle for them as well. And I could look it up real quick, but I think it's Elgerton Jenkins. Is that what it is? But whose name?
Elton. Yeah, it's Legton.
Elton Jenkins. Yeah. There he is, who is one of the best guards in the NFL, but he's also played tackle for Green Bay in multiple spots just because he has that type of versatility. I think Savon has that type of upside and versatility to him.
Yeah, there's a couple guys in that Green Bay offensive line that I wanted the Dolphins to take. I remember the draft where they took Channing Tindall and there was Zach Thomas sitting there. I'm thinking, oh man. And there's a couple guys
At least while you're talking about Channing Tindall, you could watch Leo Chenal play on in the Super Bowl, who they also should have taken, but that's another conversation for another day.
That's a whole nother Dolphins podcast. And I always say this: we can always revisit his history is nice, and every team can look back. But it's just like the Dolphins miss on the position that they actually need. It's like they need a lineman. You know, of course, we miss. It's so Dolphins. We miss on the white Notre Dame guy. Of course, we get the worst one.
Liam Eichenberg. Yeah.
All right. So I don't know. I mean, this class is strange because there's so many guys who are listed as tackles that I think are better inside, right? I guess let's start. Pure tackle. I think there's Connerly Jr.
Yep.
Ezra.
I think the two pure tackles in the group that I would be somewhat interesting is you mentioned one already. Like I think that Josh Connerly Jr. is a guy that I am not overly high on, but I see the tools, right? Like I see it. I've tried watching him multiple times, George, and there's something missing there, I think. Like there is, but he has length. He has foot quickness. There's a lot to like. There's building blocks. I just don't necessarily love the football player right now, but teams will love the football player, right? To a degree, as far as the upside that he brings. So he's one. The other guy that I think is a little bit of a sleeper, but could go top 100, and not many people even talk about him at all ever, is Chase Lunt out of UConn. That kid is going to be 6'7" plus. He's going to be 300 pounds, and he is one of the best movement-based players in this class. Outside zone system, that kid has great movement skills. Still needs to improve his core strength. Still needs to just get stronger in general, but pure movement skills, Chase Lunt out of UConn is a kid that has a lot of upside. So I think there's a couple of the pure tackle types. Outside of that, it's guys that are trying to prove that they can stay a tackle, right? Or Ariante Ursary, who I like a lot out of Minnesota, but is he a pure tackle? Probably not. He's probably more of a guard, but he's got great length, so maybe he can stay outside in the right system. Maybe, but I think he's a butt kicker inside a guard at worst. I think that he's got that type of upside to him. We're going to talk about Emory Jones out of LSU, maybe being a convert inside. There's a few of those guys. I think this week's about them proving that they can stick a tackle. That's what they're trying to prove this week.
Yeah. That's the thing. And then you got the pure guards like Tate Rutledge that are there. What are your thoughts on the two guys who are really hard to pronounce their name? Bo and then Mbo. I got something like that, right? Those guys are getting a lot of buzz.
Armin Membao, who is out of Missouri, is another interesting guy. I just talked about the fight to stay outside. He's one of the kids that's going to be fighting for that. He's got a shorter frame, As far as height, he's a little bit sawed off. He reminds me a lot of Isaiah Wynn, which I know Dolphins fans know to a degree, but like he's a shorter framed guy, but he's got good length. He measured in at 34-inch arms. So like he's got some foot quickness and length that he could stick outside. I personally do think he's a guard, but I do think that some teams will view him at tackle. So Membo, I think, is a guy that is going to fight that good fight to stay outside. I think some teams are going to be kind of all over the place. Marcus M'Bow, who out of Purdue, he's Zach Tom to me. Like he's Zach Tom. He's going to be one of those kids that's going to have like right around 33-inch arms. He's going to be about 6'3.5". He's going to be 305 pounds. Like the measurements are just very outliers, not the right word. They're very middling as far as guard or tackle. Like which one is he? But I think he's got foot quickness. I think he's a really good athlete, actually. I think he can play right tackle in the NFL without question. Like I think M'Bow can. The question is, because he's one of those interesting kids that I actually think that he could get some reps at center this week too. Like, I could see him get reps at center, could see him work at guard and tackle. He, I think, is Zach Tom this year as far as could stick at right tackle, could play inside. He's kind of a versatile movement-based player that I think is going to be a really interesting player to watch just as far as like how he matches up at multiple spots in Mobile.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and Rutledge out of how do you like the two Georgia kids? Is that what are you saying? I guess Fairchild, is that an option at 48 for them, or and Rutledge is probably a little too rich for 48 for me, or is that around where he's living there in that round?
I think it's both. I think it's a little too rich for both of them, to be honest. Yeah. Rutledge is more talented than Fairchild, but he was banged up this year, and I thought Fairchild was a lot more consistent. But I think Fairchild just kind of is what he is. It's not a bad player. It's just, I don't know, average starter potentially at guard. You know what I mean? I think Rutledge has a little bit more upside. So I think both players, they're both massive. They're both big frame kids. They both started multiple years at Georgia. So like, there's going to be a lot of teams that like them a lot. But I just think that they're just kind of, I think Fairchild especially is just kind of who he is at this point, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think Rutledge, if you can get a fully healthy version and continue to kind of trend forward, I think he does have some untapped upside, but we'll see overall. One guy that I did want to mention that I completely forgot about, who I think is one of those under radar players in this class somehow, is Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia, who is just
nobody talks about Wyatt. He's a good. You put in the tape. He's a good football player, man.
I had a late first round grade on him. I did it a couple weeks ago. I think that kid should go in the first round. I think he's a Pro Bowler in a guard. I don't think he's a tackle because he's going to have like 32-inch arms and some change. Like it's just he has no length, and I think generally foot quickness it's very average for an offensive tackle. So I think when you combine those two, he's better inside a guard. But he is a dog in the run game, man. Yeah, super physical. Gets his hands on dudes, has a lot of pop in his hands just in general, displacement power. Like, I like Wyatt Millam a lot. I think that guy he's Joe Tooney to me, right? Who Joe Tooney was a college tackle at NC State, and Tooney has turned into one of the better guards of the last 10, 15 years in the NFL as well. So I think that Wyatt Millam is that type of guy. He's going to start at guard for a long time, and he might get underrated because it's just like he's not flashy or anything, but he's just good. You know what I mean? Like he's just a good player who can play multiple systems.
That's exactly what the Dolphins need. I see Millam, one of these playoff teams, 25 to 32, they get their hands on him, plug him in. Perfect scenario.
He's going to be a Chief. I mean, we all know what's going to happen, right? He's going to be a Chief. He's going to be a Raven or a Chief.
What I said, yeah. So he's going to get. We'll talk about the Super Bowl at the end here, but yeah. So yeah, I agree. And as we're doing this kind of exercise here of going over the linemen, the Dolphins, they do the homework. If their first two picks are interior guys, two offensive linemen, they could potentially rebuild this offensive line in this draft. I think it matches their needs. To kind of close the thoughts on the offensive line.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say this is that there's like a lot of tackle versus guard conversations in this class, but like the fact that there are that many is strengthening the interior offensive line class. Like I don't think it's a great tackle class, but like if you just need guards and starting guards and maybe a couple Pro Bowler guards, like I think it's turned into a good interior offensive line class. Not a great tackle class by any stretch, but a good interior offensive line class for sure.
This draft overall is not at the top end, is not great, but there's some depth there, and especially in the positions of the Dolphins need. And I agree with you. We look at the list and we see all these tackles, but I think you're going to move majority of those inside, and that expands this guard list. And I think it's a good time for the Dolphins to look at. All right, jump over to the defense quickly here. The interior, we talk about the interior offensive line the Dolphins need. They also need interior defensive line. Really good group at the Senior Bowl, led by Shamar Stewart, who's he's a freak of nature. Guy who's like, you want him to come off the bus first. You got Walter Nolan. And my guy, all right, Deonte Walker out of Kentucky. I'm curious to get your thoughts on him. Wait, I know. But the Dolphins are missing that kind of physical presence in the middle of their defense. And I know his production went down, and he measured in at a whopping 6'7" at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah,
I'll let you start wherever you want to go there. The floor is yours, Ryan.
Yeah, Deon Walker is what's the word? What's the best word here?
Enigma.
He's a little bit of an enigma at times because you look at him on paper, and you mentioned it already. He's over 6'7". He's 340 pounds. He's got 34 plus inch arms. He is a great athlete. Like, he can move. Like, there's a lot to like there. Man, his film was up and down this year, though. Like, there were a couple games where I'm like, that's a first rounder. And there's a couple games where I'm like, that's a day 3 kid. Like, that's not good at all. Like, it just wasn't. So I still think he needs to improve his pad level. I'm very interested to see him in the everyone just gravitates toward the one-on-one pass rush drills for obvious reasons because it's fun. But I want to see him in the run game, right? Working against double teams, anchoring at the point of attack, like, because his pad level was just really bad this year. But he's talented, obviously. So if you could tell me that I'm going to get the best version of him every snap, I'm in. But the question is if you're going to get the best version of him every snap. But he's a very interesting athlete, a great athlete. Shamar Stewart is the most interesting prospect maybe in this entire class because he is going to be right around 6'5". He's not going to be as heavy as what Texas A&M listed him as. The last measurement I saw on him was 279 pounds. He's listed at 290 by Texas A&M. So he's in like that little bit of is he an interior player? Is he an edge in an odd front? Is he an edge in an even front? Like, he's a little bit of a interesting conversation of positionally what he's best at, but the kid's a freak, obviously. Like, long arms, explosive, no production. He had 6 tackles for loss and a sack and a half this year. Like, none. But the flashes
Robinson,
are there.
yeah. It's like Chop Robinson last year.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's going to be a kid that I think people are a little bit all over the place on. But he's going to go first round. He's probably going to go top 20 because you don't make guys that look like Shamar Stewart's very often. Like, he's a freak show, man. So him, I think TJ Sanders from South Carolina is a very underrated football player. Nothing flashy about him, but like he makes plays. Like, he just makes plays at the end of the day. You mentioned Deon Walker. We already had the conversation about him a little bit. I think that this defensive line class is a very good one. I mean, this is both interior defensive line and the edge group as well. And we're getting a lot of those guys because there's even guys that I think are a little bit under the radar as far as like they'll just be solid starters in the NFL. Like Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, I just think is going to be a solid starter in the NFL. I could see a guy like pick your guy. Jamari Caldwell, I think, could be a rotational nose at the NFL level. Shamar Turner, the other kid from Texas A&M, the interior player, I think he could be a solid starter in the NFL. So there's a lot of dudes to talk about. And then you even get like the Aeneas Peoples out of Virginia Tech, who's kind of that quick one-gap penetrator that started his career at Duke. There's a lot of talents and a lot of different types, which I think is very important for rounding out and making a deep defensive line class.
Yeah, I agree. It's good. The interior, I'm excited about the interior of this group, especially for the Dolphins. All right, let's move to the edge. I'm not loving this edge class. Your thoughts on the edge group that's in Mobile?
I mean, the edge group Mobile, I think, is loaded a good bit. I mean, we talk about Shamar Stewart. If we're including Shamar Stewart in that conversation, he's obviously high on that list. Nick Scourton, his teammate from Texas A&M, is going to be in Mobile, which I think is a big deal. We have Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss that started his career at Florida, which is a really twitchy, athletic pass rusher who just kind of needs to be more consistent. Donovan Ezerike out of Boston College is going to be there. I mean, there's my favorite guy of the group who I think has a chance to go top 150, maybe top 100, depending on how the process goes. I love David Walker out of Central Arkansas, who's he's an FCS kid, but he has been absolutely dominant over the last couple of years for Central Arkansas. Actually started his career, I believe, at Southern Arkansas, which is a Division II team, transferred up to Central Arkansas. And I mean, he's been a dominant force for Central Arkansas now for 3 years, 60 tackles for loss, 30 plus sacks. So David Walker, who's going to be a little bit of he's going to be an outlier from a size perspective. I don't see him being much more than over 6'1". Don't expect the arm length to be great, but that kid is a tactical rusher who understands how to win ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting. I think the difference is in the Senior Bowl, you're pretty much getting the best of the best as far as the edge group. Overall, the class, how do you feel about it?
I thought it could be better, but I still like it. I was
kind of down on it. I don't know. I'm kind of down. Not to put you off.
I was just going to say, because I think that some guys just didn't take quite the jump we were expecting for. Like Abdul Carter for Penn State made the jump, right? Yeah. He might be the best player in the class. Like he's been tremendous. But like James Pierce Jr., who I would still take in the top 15 to 20, he didn't quite take the big jump that I was expecting him in his third year at Tennessee. Nick Scourton for Texas A&M that started his career at Purdue first 2 years. He didn't really take the massive jump. And then again, like Shamar Stewart's exciting, but like, you're still banking on production, like talent turning into production at some point, right? So I understand why you're down on it, and I am down compared to where I was preseason. Like preseason, I'm like, man, I got Scourton, I got Pierce, I got Abdul Carter, like I got all these dudes. Abdul Carter is amazing. He's a blue chip player in this class, but James Pierce I thought was going to be a blue chipper. He's not. He's a very good player still. Again, I would draft him top 15. I wouldn't hesitate about it. I might even take him top 10, depending on how things shake out. But then after that, it's like Scourton was good for Texas A&M, but he wasn't great. You just expected a couple of guys to take a little bit more of a jump.
Yeah, I think I'm more down in terms of like you said, what I expected to when I looked at the list coming to this season. Like, whoa, we got difference makers on the edge. I think it does lend an opportunity for some teams to get a Pierce or somebody else who might fall, because look, let's not forget what we thought of these guys. Your opinion can't change that dramatically in 12 months. There's definitely talent in this group, but a group that I feel, just let down, right? Like it's just not what you thought it would. Yeah, could be better. All right, the linebackers, the linebacker group, edge linebacker, whatever you want to call it, the pure linebackers.
Yes.
I mean, there's not much. I mean, is there guys that you like here? I know the kid out of UCLA. I like. What are your thoughts on Bassa out of Oregon?
Great athlete. I just think he doesn't have tremendous power, and I think he's a little bit of a guesser as far as processing. But I mean, Bassa was a former safety, so like he can move, and I think he's going to look great in like the pass coverage drills. It's not a great linebacker class overall. I mean, you mentioned like the Schlesinger kid, Carson Schlesinger, who was a walk-on at UCLA that's turned into a good player. I'm not as high as like I've seen like Dane Brugler has him as like linebacker 1. Like I'm not, I love Dane, but like I'm not there with that. Like he's a really good athlete. He's good range, but I think his power is a little bit of a problem. My favorite player that's going to be here, and one of my favorite players in this entire class is Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina. Oh yeah. I love Demetrius Knight. Like I am obsessed with this kid. Fantastic backstory. He was a quarterback at Georgia Tech to begin his career. Georgia Tech quarterback, transferred to Charlotte, played linebacker at Charlotte and blew up and ended up being a dynamic linebacker for Charlotte. Then he ends his career this year as South Carolina, was one of the biggest transfer portal pickups this past portal cycle before the 2024 season. And he was tremendous for South Carolina. He is already measured in. He's over 6'1". He's 246 pounds. He's got over 33-inch arms. And I'm telling you right now, when the combine comes around, that kid's going to run 4.5 high. He's going to run like 4.57, 4.58 at almost 250 pounds. Freak athlete, strong, physical. This kid, I starting Mike in the league for many years, in my opinion. I think this kid is one of the better football players in the class that people aren't talking about enough. He's older, so he's going to be a 25-year-old rookie because he's a 6-year senior, so that's going to knock him on some people's boards. But I'm telling you right now, someone is going to get a starting linebacker in the top 75 picks, and you're never going to have to worry about Demetrius Knight for a very long time as a starting Mike.
Yeah, what do you think of Shamar James out of Florida? He's
another really good athlete. I really like him in coverage, and I know he's a Mobile kid, so he's him and Riley Leonard for Duke actually, or for Notre Dame that transferred from Duke, are actually the two local kids to Mobile that got invited this year. I think James, again, he's a little bit. He's a little bit one note. He's not incredibly physical. He's more of just a space type of linebacker, more of a will, working in pursuit type of kid. But he's got a lot of upside. He's got athletic upside to him. So he is a very I think he's just a good, solid. He'll be a special teamer on the NFL level and be a rotational player. I think that's what I think of Shamar James. So
I agree with you on that.
Last guy I wanted to shout out, and I don't really want to say his name because I'm going to butcher it and I don't know how to say it, but the other UCLA kid who started his career actually at Cal, Oladejo is how I'm going to pronounce his last name. I'm caught Olufemi Oladejo is how I'm going to pronounce it.
That sounds good.
It's probably awful though. I mean, it probably really is awful, but this kid is fascinating. He measured in at, I think, right around 34-inch arms. He is 6'3" or 6'2" and some change. He's 250 something pounds. He played in UCLA's 3-4 system. He played on ball Sam, right? So he's an outside edge type of kid in the 3-4. But man, this kid's physical. In the run game, he plays great in pursuit. He's incredibly strong at the point of attack. He looks like a Greek god. Like he looks like he was made out of granite. Like he has a great body type. I don't think he's a pass rusher on the NFL level. Like I just don't think he has high upside as a pass rusher. So I think this kid is a Sam linebacker on the NFL that could play on ball at times, right? And could do different things. So that kid, I think, is one of the underrated players in the class. You're going to draft him day 3. You're going to hope his pass rush develops, but if nothing else, he is going to be a good off ball, on ball at times run stopper. And I think that he's got a really high floor in that regard.
All right. So we'll end it with what's left, the secondary, the corners, and the safeties. I got a guy who I really like. I don't know where you see him. I love Parrish, the corner. He's just he's undersized. Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. He's undersized, but he's fast. I'm hoping he tests well. I just like the way he plays, man, when I watch him. And I just started doing the offensive line tape. I don't start diving the tape, until the season's over because I'm mostly doing the Dolphins in season. But a little bit I watch of Parrish. I just like him. I don't know how you see him.
There's just no chance he isn't a solid starting nickel in the NFL, if nothing else, right? Like there's just no chance that he isn't. He's tenacious. He's physical for his size. He plays with good short area explosiveness. I think Parrish, he's not going to be an outside corner like he mostly played at Kansas State, but he'll be a nickel in the NFL and he'll be a good one probably. So yeah, I think that he has a very high floor to being developed into a starting nickel on the NFL level. And I like this corner class. This corner class is awesome. Safety's good too, but I think the corner class is maybe the deepest class of anybody, even including running backs. Corner class, I think, is dynamite. I mean, unfortunately, Savon Ravel out of ECU wasn't able to participate at East West because he's coming back from an injury, and Kobe Bryant was actually down at East West, who I like a ton at Kansas. But I mean, I'm just looking at some of the names on the list, and Azare Thomas, the defensive back out of Florida State, is my pick as far as being the biggest riser of this group. The kid is going to be 6'2". He's going to be physical. He's going to be able to run, and he is one of the best press man corners in this class. So that's a kid that I think is going to get a lot of talk because at Florida State this year, they sucked, and no one talked about Thomas because they were a bad football team, and you tend not to talk about good players on bad football teams. You just don't tend to do that. I mean, for a year. I mean, I felt like we never talked about Joe Thomas for Cleveland when he was with the Browns, right? Because the Browns sucked. But then at the end of the year, we're like, wow, Joe Thomas might be the best offensive tackle of all time. At least he's in the conversation, right? Thomas is the same way for Florida State. One of the best corners in college football and one of the best corners in this draft that we didn't talk about because Florida State was awful. They went 2-10 or whatever the heck they went. They were really bad. I could see him ending up late in the first round somewhere Baltimore or something like that. The side, because I think you're right. We're going to see now, they struggled, Florida State. The attention wasn't there. But now when we get into all the testing and all that stuff and you meet the kid, I think he's a guy, I agree with you, riser, late first. Could sneak into that end of the first round. Wouldn't surprise me. And then you got, who else we got at the Senior Bowl? Maxwell Harrison's one of my guys this year out of Kentucky. I could see him being a late first rounder, but if not, early second rounds out of Kentucky. He was banged up this year a little bit, missed a couple games. But he's another kid that's going to be over 6 foot. He's going to have pretty good length, and he's got great recovery speed. So I think the building blocks are there for him being a really good player. Quincy Riley, I think, is a really underrated player out of Louisville. That's probably a starting nickel, if not an outside corner on the NFL level. Just looking down the list, I mean, Yeah, the corner I think is great, but like even like Andrew Makuba out of Texas, the safety that would transfer from Clemson, who's a physical kid who has pretty good range on the back end. I think he's talented. Darian Porter's measured in at
I
like
yeah.
6'2" and like 33 and something inch arms. Like there's a lot of really talented defensive backs, man. Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech,
I was just gonna
underrated.
I was just gonna say, if you need somebody who can come in and cover, Dorian Strong's your guy. Like don't be surprised somebody drafts him and he's starting at some point in year one. I like Dorian Strong.
No one talks about him for two reasons. One, Mansour Delane, who transferred to LSU, went back for another year.
Yep.
Everyone talks about Mansour, and for good reason. Mansour is very good. He's a very talented player. But the other side of it is Dorian Strong's like a almost a pure zone-based corner, and people don't like talking about zone-based corners because they're not as sexy as man corners, right? It's like, I want to talk about the guy that covers man-to-man. And it's like, I understand that, and it's very important. But like that Dorian Strong, like he's going to go to a zone-based system in like the top 75, top 100 picks.
Yeah.
And he'll start. He was just going to be a good starter in the NFL for probably a pretty long time. So, yes, Dorian Strong is a good player, a little bit of an older prospect, but the kid can play. The kid can just play at the end of the day.
All right. Anything else in the corner group before we get finished off with the safeties?
No, I think yeah, I'm looking down. Again, I mean, I wish my biggest letdown was that Kobe Bryant from Kansas wasn't at this spot and he went to East West instead, because he has been dominating East West all week. Like no one can mess with Kobe Bryant, and I wanted to see him in Mobile, but that's my only regret with this class, I think.
All right, now the safety group. Before we get to the guys in this game, what's the difference between Starks and the second guy slips my name, the second safety, the big safety out of Texas? Is it Texas A&M?
Eman Worry.
Eman Worry. Yeah. I don't have them. I don't have them as far apart as people like the media has them.
I have Eman Worry is almost in every single one of my first round mock drafts, so I like him a ton out of South Carolina. Nick Eman Worry, he's 6'3", 227 pounds, and he is physical and he has good movement skills for his size as well. So yeah, he's going to go early. I'd be shocked. I'd be surprised if he doesn't go top 32, but I think at worst he's a top 50 kid for sure. I think Starks is just a little bit of a different athlete than all the safeties in this class, man. Like I know a team that has a high grade on him as an outside corner. Like, so like the movement skills, I just think are a little bit different. Like he can play man to man in the slot. He has range playing single high from the roof. He can play too high, come down in the box. Like, I just don't think there's a lot that you don't get with a guy like a Malachi Starks. So I think that upside is just tremendous for him to be a really good player and an impactful player on the next level.
Yeah. As far as the safeties for me that are at the Senior Bowl, there's a couple guys when I look at the list intrigue me. Obviously, the Watts. I don't think he's playing with.
He's not participating. I think he'll be down there for like interviews, but like after the long season, he's not going to be participating. Yeah. Yeah.
A guy, Maxim Hook. All right. What are your thoughts? Is he? Again, one of these guys that you look and say something about this kid, right? Your eyes are the best tendency to tell you what a player is. I always say that. Like the athletic testing, all that stuff is fun. But if you do this enough and you watch a lot, your eyes will tell you the answers you're looking for. And to me, he's one of those kids. What are your thoughts on Hook?
I mean, Hook, number 25 for Toledo, safety, 6 foot, 206 pounds. I noticed him first when I was watching Quinyon Mitchell a couple years ago. The year before Quinyon declared, I'm like, who the heck's 25 is making plays? Because they bring him down into the box. He's a really good tackler in space. That kid is going to get drafted on day 3, and he's going to be a special teams warrior for years and years and years and years. Like, that's what Maxon Hook is. And I wouldn't be shocked if he starts at some point. Like, I think that he is at least a good – I think he needs to be a solid starting strong safety in the NFL, but if nothing else, he's going to be a really dynamite special teamer. So Toledo, man, has had some guys in the secondary the last couple of years, and it's going to continue here because they have a safety for next year, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, that people are going to need to know pretty soon this offseason. But Maxon Hook, I think, is going to play in the NFL for a very long time. Anybody catch your eye at the safety position at the Senior Bowl? Yeah. Makuba was a guy that I mentioned briefly already. He was the transfer from Clemson, who I think I had questions of like just overall physicality coming into this year because he was a good coverage player at Clemson, but I was just looking for a little bit more of that just, tone setter type. And he was killing dudes at Texas this year. So I think that he is a tremendous player. I don't know. I don't know if Lathan Ransom from Ohio State's going to be participating because obviously he had a long season as well. But Billy Bowman Jr. from Oklahoma is another guy that's like he's a hybrid safety nickel. Like he played all over the place at Oklahoma. He's a little bit smaller. He's maybe going to be a hair under 5'10". He's going to be 190 pounds, but like kid just makes plays, man. Like at the end of the day, so I wouldn't be shocked if he's at least a top 150 kid, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's a top 100 kid if he tests well enough. But people are going to overlook him a little bit based upon size.
Yeah. And the Dolphins certainly will be looking for safety help. They probably are going to need two because I'm pretty sure Javon Holland's going to be walking this year. So those wraps up the prospects. In general here, the UM class we talked about, there's 4 guys there. We talked about Restrepo, Martinez, the running back, Arroyo, the tight end. And then we have Jalen Rivers. I don't know if you want to mention, I don't know what do you think of Jalen Rivers, but of those 4 guys, who do you think has the most to gain here at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I think that Jalen Rivers is just kind of is what he is. He's a massive kid. Don't think he's very athletic, but like you're going to sell yourself as like a potential day 3 player that can back up a couple different spots. He's played left tackle. He probably fits better in inside at guard. So like he's a kid that I think just needs to try to find a role, right? So I think that this setting is built for a Xavier Restrepo. Like this is the slot receiver dream in one-on-ones. You know what I mean? Like, so he's probably going to show up, but I think the guy that I think has the most to play for, I just think it's an interesting conversation between Martinez and Arroyo at the end of the day, because Martinez I want to see his weight down a little bit. And I want to see how well he moves in space. I want to see if he can kind of make his mark in a running back group that isn't great in Mobile, but then Arroyo, there is some reality where Arroyo is like tight end 4 in this class. Like I think he can make that type of ascension. So I think it's between Arroyo and Martinez as far as like who has the most to gain, because I think that both of them have a path in these respective classes where they could be risers at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Arroyo's a guy who's going to rise when teams kind of see him obviously in running routes and stuff. But yeah, Restrepo, it's going to be like a Roman Wilson kind of thing, running at the Senior Bowl in those one-on-ones. All right, so give Dolphin fans 3 guys keep an eye on, or some guys you say, in the Dolphins what they need. Let's keep our eyes on whether it's Senior Bowl practice week or the game. I'm sure we've talked about it, but just quickly, a couple guys you say, take this guy, keep your eye on him. I like him for the Dolphins.
Yeah, well, we mentioned Jonas 7A, obviously, at offensive tackle, but I would say I mentioned him briefly, but Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota, especially if Miami wants to trade back maybe a couple spots and then kind of recruit some capital a little bit, I could see in the right system, I think he could play tackle at the next level as a right tackle. But I think if anything else, I mean, he's going to be a 6'6", 338-pound guard who has pretty good movement skills. So Ariante Ursary could give you a lot more nasty inside on the offensive line, which I think is very interesting. I think that when we're talking about like a tight end, I mean, if we're talking about local right there, Elijah Arroyo is very interesting potentially for Miami if that's a guy they want to go with. I think he's a very interesting movement-based player and would fit the wide zone West Coast system very well that McDaniel obviously wants to run. I think a safety sleeper, day 3, that especially if we're talking about a guy that could play down in the box and even do some stuff on the second level, which could help Miami in a decent pinch. Malik Verdon from Iowa State is a very interesting player. He's like 6'3", 220 pounds, really good athlete. He's had some injuries over the last couple of years, missed some time, including a full season. So I think the medicals are going to be a big thing for him. But I think if you're looking for a guy that just can come in and can play and at least contribute on special teams and develop behind a couple safeties, I think he's extremely interesting. And then interior defensive line, I mean, we talked about a bunch of them. I think one of the more underrated guys in the class just overall is Aeneas Peoples that I keep talking about, who is I think every team needs interior penetrators. I just think they do. And he's going to be a size outlier. He's going to be 6'1". He's going to be 290 pounds. But, man, he can one gap, and on obvious passing situations, he can create some havoc. So I think Peoples is a guy that after Mobile, we're going to start talking about a little bit more because there's just not a ton of – there's some good defensive linemen in this class. There's not a ton of, like, obvious passing situations. I need a penetrator inside, and I think that's what Peoples brings to the table.
All right, so those are some of the guys, Dolphin fans. Like I said on the top of this show, keep an eye on this game because there's going to be a few of these guys who are going to be Miami Dolphins, and you go back and there's practices all week and the game, and that's the most important part, right? The game's almost an afterthought. Maybe not for the quarterbacks, but
yeah,
but it should be fun. Before we let you go, Super Bowl prediction. We got to. I was not the two teams I wanted, but we got a Chiefs Eagles Super Bowl. Exciting.
I have so many mixed. Yeah. I have so many mixed feelings on the game because my wife's an Eagles fan because I live right outside of Philadelphia, so like it'd be nice. But I also disliked a lot of Eagles fans that I grew up with, so I kind of root against the Eagles, tend to. So my prediction, though, analyst side, I think that the Chiefs win, but I will be pulling for the Eagles just based upon my wife, and hopefully they win for her, I guess.
Yeah. Well, all right, guys, we'll wrap it up here. Again, Ryan, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much, everybody in the chat, the Die Bar Podcast, DSG, Kenny, Finstock Sports Network, all you guys. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. Before we go, Ryan, tell them what you got going on, where they can follow all your great work.
Yeah, A to Z Sports. Obviously, with the college football season behind, we're streamlined right into NFL draft coverage. So, Senior Bowl coverage this week, weekly mock drafts, scouting reports, anything, rumor mill stuff, like anything I'm hearing just kind of down the stretch the last couple months. It'll be at A to Z Sports. I'll be at the Combine in Indianapolis too next month. From the I think it goes from February 27th to like March 3rd or something like that. So I'll be down in Indy for anybody that kind of wants the exclusive coverage there. A to Z Sports at RiseNDraft on Twitter for anybody that is following.
Yeah, please check Ryan out. He does great work, knows his stuff, as you can see. Ryan, maybe sometime after the Combine, we'll get you on again. I appreciate it, guys. Everybody will be back with you guys next Monday, I think, at our regularly scheduled time. So thanks, everybody. As always, stay Fins faithful. We are out.